Hi, I am Menchaca, and this is my FMOD implementation demo reel. I started making an asset list of the sounds I was going to design to implement them in the game. For most of the events in FMOD to communicate with the Unity engine, I decided to write C# scripts to call the events from FMOD to the game. I use synthesis designing different layers to give the sensation of a resting motorship. I make an FMOD event looping the sound. In the spatializer, I modify the max and min distance attenuation to simulate the distance of the sound when the player approaches the ship. I change the start offset to have different start point every time the audio triggers. Then I make a script which I attach to the ship game object for the audio to trigger when the player is at certain distance of the ship. For the footsteps, I recorded different material steps. In FMOD, I use a parameter material control which will change the sound of the material the player is running depending on the value of the parameter. I make a C# script using a function with a raycast that will check the type of the material the player is standing and updating each frame the position of the player. For the sound, to trigger every time Ellen makes a step, I tagged the materials of the game with the different values of the parameters at FMOD, and call that same function in the Ellen running animation. For the Ellen weapon, I use different layers using synthesis for the magical sound and recorded different whooshes and metal impacts to get the final sound. I used a multi-instrument with different versions of the sound, then I added some pitch and volume automation to have more variety. For this to work at Unity, I modified the melee weapon script and triggered the FMOD event at the begin attack function. For the Grenadier, I used synthesis and recorded different layers for the sounds, and did different multi-instrument events with pitch and volume automation in each one. Again, I modified the script for the Grenadier behavior to trigger each sound on the specific function where the action is programmed. For the Chomper, I recorded different growls and impacts and used a multi-instrument event for each action, randomizing the volume and the pitch. For the communication with Unity, I make a different approach, calling each specific action with a function and attaching it to the animations. For the health box, I use synthesis looping the sound in FMOD. For the implementation, I use a parameter to trigger the sound of the chest opening and another automating a delay effect for when the player regains health, depending on the value the player life was before picking up the health box. So, the delay effect will be more intense if the player has less life and less intense if the player has more life. For the script, I basically make a function that will call the event from FMOD and a second function that will check if the player enters the health box area, triggering the chest sound to check how much health the player has for the delay effect to be triggered depending on the player's health. In Unity, I attach the health box script to the health create game object. I designed the teleport sound using synthesis, and in FMOD I loop the audio with distance attenuation and have different parameters. One to simulate the distance automating the low end of an EQ, and another parameter to trigger the portal sound once the player enters the teleporter. I write script assigning the instance of the FMOD event to the teleporter game object in Unity, using a function that activates and checks when the player enters the teleporter to trigger the sound of the portal depending on the value of the parameter stored inside the event variable. Thank you for watching my FMOD demo reel.